President, please be seated. The court is now in session. Today, the chamber will resume hearing testimony of the expert Isa Osman. And before we proceed to hearing his testimony, the chamber will hear oral responses from parties to the submission by Noon Chia's request for another witness to be heard. That is pursuant to Rule 87.4 in relation to Phnom Krao Security Center. Mr. M. Hoi, please report the attendance of the parties and other individuals to today's proceedings. Grazie, Mr. President. For today's proceedings, all parties to this case are present. Mr. Noon Chia is present in the holding cell downstairs. He has waived his right to be present in the courtroom. The waiver has been delivered to the greffier. The expert who is to testify today, that is Isa Osman, as well as Julie Badash, the legal officer of the Office of the Co-Investigating Judges, ready to be called by the chamber. Thank you. President, thank you, Mr. M. Hoi. The chamber now decides on the request by Noon Chia. The chamber has received a waiver from Noon Chia, dated 23rd March 2016, which states that due to his health, headache, back pain, he cannot sit or concentrate for long, and in order to effectively participate in future hearings, he requests to waive his rights to be present at the 23rd March 2016 hearing. Having seen the minute court report of Noon Chia by the duty daughter for the accused at the ECCC, dated 23rd March 2016, which notes that Noon Chia has a chronic back pain and cannot sit for long, and the pain becomes more severe when he sits for long, and recommends that the chamber shall grant him his request so that he can follow the proceedings remotely from the holding cell downstairs. Based on the above information and pursuant to Rule 81.5 of the ECCC internal rules, the chamber grants Noon Chia his request to follow today's proceedings remotely from the holding cell downstairs via an audio-visual means. The chamber instructs the AV unit personnel to link the proceedings to the room downstairs so that Noon Chia can follow. That applies for the whole day. Now the chamber wishes to hear the oral responses from other parties in relation to the motion filed by Noon Chia's defense to call another witness in relation to Phnom Krao Security Center, as well as the witness statement of this witness by the SICAM, which was done on the 23rd March 2007. In response to the co-prosecutor's request to hear two additional witnesses for Phnom Krao Security Center in lieu of those witnesses who are now deceased, the defense team for Noon Chia also informs the chamber that they wish to request for another witness, as well as his interview with the SICAM, that is in relation, that is in compliance with Rule 87.4. And also on the afternoon of the 21st of March 2016, an advance copy of the relevant document was sent to the chamber and the parties, and through the legal officer of the chamber, An email was sent to parties that the Chamber wishes to hear responses from other parties in relation to that motion. And we would like to hear now the importance of this witness testimony so that the Chamber may use it as the basis for our decision as to whether court that witness or not. And in order to reiterate the request, I'd like to hand the floor to the defense team for Nguyen Chia to make a brief motion in relation to that request as well as the grounds for such a request. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, Your Honors, good morning, Council. Yes, as indicated last Monday, we are going to be filing a Rule 87 request. I think parties are still only in the possession of a courtesy copy. It is a request to hear one additional witness. We feel this witness is an important witness in relation to events not only in Mondulkiri but in the whole of the northeast zone in the period between 1975 and 79. As the Chamber might recall, excerpts of the summary of his DC Chem statement has been used by us to confront most of the witnesses who have now testified not only in relation to Phnom Krol but also in relation to Okan Seng. The witness potentially could provide very interesting evidence when it comes to Vietnamese incursions into the northeast zone as of '76. He could offer evidence as to assistance by cadres and 801 or 920 Division soldiers to Vietnamese troops. He himself seems to have offered evidence that he was instructed to fight the rebellion movement, the movement which he calls the Kampun movement. So we believe that he has very interesting insights into events relevant to both Phnom Krol and Okan Seng and the general military situation in the northeast zone. We're not quite sure yet whether the English summary that we have, which is document E3/7960, is indeed contains an accurate summary of his DC Chem statement. As you were able to read in our courtesy copy of our motion, there's only a Khmer version available of his testimony before DC Chem. I'm not quite sure when the English translation is coming, if at all. But obviously, if the Trial Chamber were to admit the Khmer version of his DC Chem statement, obviously we need to have the full English translation as well. Then the question, of course, why now? Why not earlier? Part of the reason is that our request was triggered by the prosecution's request to summon a witness, or rather a civil party, which we believe now has the pseudonym 2TCCP 1017. This civil party is also a 920 Division combatant, and according to the prosecution, one of the one of the surviving prisoners, 920 Division prisoners. And in order to get a complete picture as to what happened exactly to the Division 920 soldiers who were arrested and who were detained, we believe it is in the interest of the ascertainment of the truth that not only to TCCP 1017 will be summoned, but also the witness whose name I shall not mention, but whom we have requested. So we believe that it is important that in addition to the witness who's coming tomorrow, also the witness that we have requested will come to the courtroom and to give his testimony as to the events in Northeast Zone, especially the role of Vietnam, military incursions, and the support by, as he calls it, a rebellion movement in 76, 77. That is very short summary of our request, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Counsel, and I'd like to hand the floor to Judge Laverne.
Yes, Counsel Kope, I would like you to clarify something. Can you tell us exactly in what segment of this trial is the one for which this witness would be most relevant? We are examining evidence on the security center at Okanseng. I don't see the relevance of this witness's testimony to this evidence on the security center. Perhaps you should clarify this point.
Well, he is relevant in relation to not Okanseng, but rather Phnom Krol Security Center in the first place. Secondly, we believe that there was indeed a geographical distinction between Ratanakiri and Mondulkiri. However, the Northeast Zone is usually treated as one by the DK government. So his testimony is also relating to the nature of the armed conflict with Vietnam, the matter of quote-unquote internal purges, because he speaks about a rebellion movement that was supporting Vietnamese troops and Vietnamese incursions. So primarily Phnom Krol, secondly his knowledge in relation to Division 920, which, as the trial chamber knows, also plays an important role in relation to S21. Armed conflict in general, and the purges. So all segments that we will be dealing with in the next few weeks, we believe that this witness is important too.
Thank you, Counsel. The Chamber would like now to hand the floor to the co-prosecutors to respond to the motion by the defense team for Anun Chia. You may proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Your Honors, and everyone present. Your Honors, we do not have an objection to the DC CAM statement being admitted onto the case file. Of course, it needs to be translated also. We also would not object to the witness being summoned. We obviously have a very different interpretation of the witness's evidence and that statement than the defense does. I would just point out that my understanding, so we're clear we're talking about the same DC CAM statement, the defense motion said it was dated 2007, but what we have, I understand, it's only in Khmer, it's dated 2001. So I don't think there has been contact with this witness that we know of since 2001. But that said, we do not object to the witness.
Perhaps counsel could clarify this document issue?
Maybe I could get back to that after the break. We're still in the. What we could do is address the issue when we actually file the motion itself. We're still in the stage of a courtesy copy. I'm not quite sure whether it's a 2001 or 2007 DCCAM statement, but let me get back to you on this.
Thank you, counsel, and I'd like to hand the floor now to the lead co-lawyers for civil parties. But, good morning, Your Honors. We do not have any objection to the request for this witness and his statement. Thank you. And what about the defense team for Kyiv Sampon? Do you wish to make a response?
Oui, merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very rapidly, obviously we do not have any objection to the tendering of this document into evidence and to the summoning of the witness. I would like to point out that we, the Kyiv Sampon defense, have always favored the summoning of witnesses in light of the reading of documents, because it would enable the parties to use those documents to cross-examine the witnesses.
Thank you, counsel. And the chamber would like to thank all the parties for their oral responses to this motion. And I noticed that there is no objection by any other parties to the motion filed by the defense team for Anunchir. And the chamber will deliberate on this motion and issue of a decision in due course. And Councillor Copper, you have the floor.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. An observation before the expert will come in. It's actually a request for guidance from the trial chamber in relation to one particular topic that we would like to confront Mr. Osman with, and that is, I shall not use names, but that is the testimony of two witnesses who testified in a closed session. 2 TCW 938 and 2 TCW 894 respectively. We're not quite sure how we should deal with confronting Mr. Osman with certain excerpts from the closed session testimony of these two witnesses. Should, once we arrive at that subject, go into closed session as well, or should we just continue?
Why are you making this request now? Pourquoi vous faites cette demande maintenant?
Why are you making this request now, in the last minute? You've known for weeks that we had to take Mr. Osman's deposition. Why wait for the last minute?
We're hearing his testimony now, and before he comes in, it's a subject that I will not address until the break. But I'm just, as a matter of caution, I'm asking this. If you have any position, I would be happy to hear it.
President, regarding the request just made by Councillor Copper, you should leave that topic aside for now, and that you may refer to that topic toward the end of questioning the expert. And court officer, please usher the expert as well as the legal officer of the OCIJ into the courtroom.
So, sorry, just to be clear, and these questions will have to be done in closed session then. I think we actually said that in a memorandum, but be that as it may, to clarify, leave it to the end, we'll close the session, you ask your questions then.
Monsieur le Président, je profite.
Mr. President, may I avail myself of this time as we wait for Mr. Osman to come into the courtroom to say something about tomorrow's hearings. I believe we haven't had any news on witness TCW 140 to know whether that witness is appearing or not. So we would like to know who the witness appearing after Mr. Osman will be in order to prepare ourselves accordingly. I haven't seen any memo from the chamber on that subject.
President, the chamber will inform the parties on this issue today. The chamber hands the floor to the co-defense teams. First, to the defense team for Onunjir to put the questions to the expert, Mr. Isar Osman. You may proceed, counsel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Mr. Osman. I would like to start this morning with asking you a few follow-up questions in relation to the methodology of your work, used for your work, matters of expertise, sources, and your books. Let me start by asking a very brief question in relation to your books. You answered the question of the prosecution that you've written 2 books, and these were the books that we have been discussing at length a few weeks ago. But is it correct that you wrote a 3rd book as well, a book called Navigating the Rift?
Mr. Expert, yes, that is correct, counsel. I have authored 2 books, and they are related to the crimes committed during the Khmer Rouge regime against the Cham people. And the 3rd book, as you have said, the title, that is Navigating the Rift, is not related to the subject matter of the Khmer Rouge regime. It is about the current events in Cambodia. That is about the good relationship between the Cham people and the Khmer people.
And was that the reason that when asked you didn't mention that 3rd book?
International co-prosecutor, you have the floor.
Just request a cite of where it was that the witness was asked the question that counsel believes he gave an incomplete answer to. If I could just hear the citation for that.
I don't have the exact citation now, but I believe Mr. Osman confirms that he offered evidence that he wrote 2 books, and he's now confirming that there is in fact a 3rd book called Navigating the Rift. I shall not be asking any questions about that book. My question is it correct that when you were asked questions you didn't mention Navigating the Rift, and if yes, why was that?
Well, Your Honor, if I may, I do object. Witnesses are instructed to answer the questions that they are asked. If counsel has a question this witness was asked, in which how many books did he write, I'd like to see the citation. If he was asked, did you write the Cham Rebellion and Okubane, that's a very different question. So I think to be fair to the witness, counsel should cite the question that he's implying the witness gave an inaccurate answer to.
Let me read to you the excerpt. Mr. President, let me sit down, otherwise I cannot read it. It's transcript of 9th February. It says, yes, I have authored 2 books dealing with democratic Kampuchea regime. And on my hand is the first book entitled Ukuba, which translated into Khmer as Justice. And I also authored a second book entitled The Cham Rebellion. And besides the 2 books, I have written several articles concerning the DK regime. And I have published in the Searching for the Truth magazines, as well as some local newspapers. So again, I think my question is relevant and is triggered by his response, offering evidence to suggest that he wrote 2 books and some articles. And my question is why he didn't offer evidence saying that he wrote a 3rd book called Navigating the Rift.
Your Honor, my request is quite simple. Can we have the question that the witness was responding to so we can see whether or not the implication that he was incomplete in his answer was correct or not?
It's really not a very important point, Mr. President, but the question was, have you written articles or books in relation to democratic Kampuchea regime?
And his answer always points to, these are the books in relation to...
Judge Vance, do you have the floor?
It strikes me, if I understand it correctly, that the 3rd book is not about the democratic Kampuchea regime, while this question and his answers always clearly refer to books that are about the democratic Kampuchea regime.
Well, I'm not quite sure whether that is accurate, but I really don't have a problem. I was asking, well, I will rephrase, no problem. Is it correct that you wrote a 3rd book? It's a general question.
Answer, that is correct.
And is it your testimony that this book has nothing to do with events in relation to democratic Kampuchea regime, and that's the reason why you didn't mention it, correct?
Answer. The question put to me in relation to my research on the democratic Kampuchea regime. At that time, the question was not put to me in relation to all the books that I have authored. And I replied only about my researches in relation to the democratic Kampuchea regime.
I wasn't implying that you were hiding anything at all, Mr. Osman. I just wanted to know what the reason was for not mentioning that book. Let me now go to the issue of your education. I understand you studied English for 3 years. Is it also correct that after those 3 years of English at the Bill Bright University, you didn't do any formal education in terms of universities, master programs? Is that correct?
Answer. I studied at Bill Bright University. I pursued the English literature for 4 years, and after that I obtained a bachelor degree in English literature. And later on, I did not pursue my master degree.
Did you follow any courses or any other, or did you take any other education in the fields of history, demographics, linguistics, Islam or Quran studies, ethnology, any of those areas of study?
Answer. I attended short training courses. My apology. However, I cannot recall all the training courses that I attended. Some courses did not take place in a formal way in the school, but it took place as an exchange between me and my mentor. And besides that, I attended seminars, workshops in relation to researches.
But any of those fields, academic fields, did you follow any courses or additional study in those fields that I just mentioned?
My apology. I have a sore throat and I have a health issue, but today I am committed to testify before the chamber, although I have a little bit health issue. As I said earlier, Council, I did not attend former courses as you described. I have read books and I have met researchers, professors, lecturers. I put questions in relation to what I wanted to know. In particular, during the time that I worked at the DC camp, I have met many outstanding researchers.
Let me focus on one particular area of expertise, because I do have quite a bit of questions in relation to that topic a bit later on. Did you follow any course, any seminar, any whatever on the topic of demographic studies, demography? Are you in any way taught some elementary principles of demographics?
Answer. If you are mentioning about science, it is quite broad. But the methods, research methodologies, and compiling information, I did join the courses. About the research in science, namely medicines, about the universe, I did not attend such courses.
Let me ask you one additional question in this respect. In your book Ukuba, E3/1822, on page 161, English ERN 0007859, we can read the following, quote, "Given the experience levels of DC Chem researchers, we do not strictly apply the standard social science research hypothetical deductive methodology. The DC Chem field research policy is based firmly upon experience that has demonstrated the importance of avoiding leading questions." End of quote. You remember writing this in your book? And if yes, what does it mean?
Answer regarding methodologies, particularly the necessary methodologies in my research. We should not ask leading questions to witnesses. That is, the question should not be put to the multiple choice questions should not be put to witnesses, but we can ask open questions for witnesses to describe whether the facts are true or not.
But not applying the standard social science research methodology, what does that mean?
Answer: I do not know what you are talking about, the research in scientific way. As a researcher, we cannot determine what answers we wanted to get. And in my research methodology, I am giving opportunities to witnesses or to the interviewees to give the responses without any pressure on them, without any threat to them. They can provide answers at their own will, so what they think it is right or wrong, and I want them to describe their recollection during the Khmer Rouge time. This is the basic principle in my researches. It cannot be determined that we will get all answers as we want, and usually I provide the opportunities to the interviewees to answer at their own will. I do not really understand what you are talking about in relation to the research in scientific way.
Let me make it concrete by giving you an example. But before I give that example, is it correct that in your book, for instance, the Cham Rebellion, you only use very limited excerpts from the interviews that you had, and the excerpts that you use do not contain a question from you and a subsequent answer, therefore making it difficult to verify whether you asked leading questions, yes or no.
Answer. That is correct. Regarding the book entitled Rebellion, there is one section that I quoted the accounts of the interviewees, particularly those who experienced the regime. But that section was not included all the questions that I put to them. The purpose is to allow the readers to easily understand the stories. And some stories are given to the interviewees to verify whether those stories are consistent with what they described. And the interviewees agree that those stories are consistent. After that, those accounts and story are published in that book, that section of the book. However, those accounts and story does not go through the legal process, meaning that I did not ask the interviewees to put their fingerprints and to be legitimized by any legal authority. Every interview are recorded in an audio means at the Document Center of Cambodia.
Thank you for that answer. Let me go back to my question on methodology and give you one concrete example. And this example goes to the methods that you used to verify the reliability of certain evidence that was given to you. I have in front of me a WRI from a woman who also testified in this court and who also spoke to you. I'm referring, Mr. President, to English ERN 00274703, French 00224113, and Khmer 002044445. The woman's name is No Sataz. She might be familiar to you because you spoke to her. And she says the following to the investigators. She was talking about an alleged execution of Cham people. And she says, I did not witness the execution, but later I was told about the execution by a person who had seen it. I do not remember that person's name. I told Mr. Osman that I saw the execution as I wanted to seek justice against those murderers. End of quote. Asked a question on this, No Satas confirmed this in court. So my question is, what were your methods to make sure that the people that you spoke to were not giving hearsay evidence or were in general reliable?
Answer. I observed that some witnesses that I have interviewed when that they were invited to testify before the chamber, gave some different accounts from what they described to me. That is my observation. However, as I have mentioned earlier, I gave choices, whatever I can, to each and every witness to try to recall the answers or facts. More importantly, if some of those witnesses had a difficulty in speaking Khmer language, sometimes they could not speak Khmer well and could not recall which words to describe. As a Muslim person, I allowed them to speak Cham language in light of their difficulty in Khmer. Once again, the interviews that I conducted were recorded in an audio means. If you have any doubts in the council, you can go and find those audio recording and listen to it.
I don't necessarily have doubts, Mr. Osman. I just wanted to try to find out how you yourself tried to verify the reliability of the evidence that people gave to you. But let me move on because I don't have that much time. Last time you were asked by the prosecution how many individuals you spoke to for your book, The Cham Rebellion in Ukuba, and you said that you didn't really know the exact number. So we did some counting, and I'm just asking you whether that is roughly accurate. Would it be correct to say that you interviewed about 97 people for your book, The Cham Rebellion?
Answer. Thank you for spending time and counting how many interviewees I met. I stand by what I said. I cannot recall the exact numbers of the interviewees that I met, but if you said it is about 97 of them, I accept that figure suggested by you, and thank you very much for spending time counting the numbers of interviewees I met. Let me declare solemnly that I believed in my researches. It is reliable, accurate, just, and I did not try to fool the history. And what happened to Cham people did not limit to the stories in my book. There are many more experiences, stories of those people happening in the society, particularly what happened to them in the regime.
Just to be very sure, I was not at all implying that you were fooling history. I was just trying to find out exactly what your methods of work are. Is it correct that of those approximately 97 witnesses that you interviewed for the Cham Rebellion, that the vast majority of those witnesses are coming from Crouchmar district and the immediate surroundings?
Answer. I did not spend time counting that number, but I think it's about right, so the number 97, as you said. Most of them that I have interviewed lived in Krojma district. That is correct. Most of them were living in Krojma district.
And then your book, Ukuba, we counted about 115 people that you spoke to. You used 17 interviews conducted by other people, and it seems that 10 interviews that you held in and that you used in Ukuba were also used in your book, The Cham Rebellion. Would that be accurate as well? And by the way, I'm very happy to give you the product of our research so that in the break you can have a look at it. But is that roughly accurate when it comes to your book, The Cham Rebellion in Ukuba?
Answer. In fact, there are some small group of the stories. I did not include every detail about the rebellion, but I guess there is a section describing about the rebellion of Cham people as well in that book.
Now, most interviews that you did were taken by you in 2000, 2001, some a bit later. Would you be able to give your estimate as to how many Cham were living in Cambodia in total at the beginning of this century?
Answer. Counsel, in fact, I did not conduct any researches on number of Cham people who came to reside in the land of Cambodia. I did not do the research how many of them came to reside in Cambodia. But it is my observation that Cambodia, the land of Cambodia, is the one which received the influx of Cham victims. Back in the history, there were wars between Champa country and Vietnam, and in the history, the history shows that Vietnam invaded Champa. Vietnam did not invade the land of Champa, but also killed Cham people. So there were different stages that Cham people fled the land of war and came to reside in a safer ground.
I apologize, Mr. Osman, for interrupting you, but my question was very, very, very simple and very short. Do you know, yes or no, how many Cham roughly lived in the beginning of the century in Cambodia? Let me assist you a bit. You said that post 1979 there were about 200,000 Cham living in Cambodia. Whether that's correct or not, we will get back to that. But what is your estimate as to how many Chams were living when you started your research? Living in Cambodia.
Answer. Do you want to ask me about the period before 1979, that is the period of Khmer Rouge time?
No, beginning of the century when you did your research. I'll tell you why I want to know this so that you can incorporate it into your answer. The 100 or so people, maybe 200 people that you interviewed, the Cham people, how did you establish whether they were in any respect representative of the Cham people that were actually living in DK and were still living after 79? After 79 there were 200,000 Cham. A lot of them possibly returned as well. What did you do to make sure that the people that you spoke to were indeed representative of the Cham living in democratic Kampuchea?
Answer. In relation to the 200,000 of Cham, that number, I mean those 200,000 of Cham were living in the country after 1979. I have with me a document indicating the number that I quoted from. I did not interview just only one or two people. I have several documents, the reliable ones, that Cham people who lived in the country after the fall of Pol Pot were around 200,000.
Mr. Osman, we've established that that's your opinion. Let me try it differently. You are very firm, you were very firm in this courtroom and you are very firm in other publications that there was a policy of genocide in relation to the Cham. There was a DK policy to destroy in whole or in part the Cham as a group. I'll get back to that. It seems that these conclusions are at least partially, but it seems predominantly based on the interviews that you held with these people. My question is, what were your methods to establish that the people that you spoke to were somehow representative of the 200,000 people who were at least living, according to you, in Cambodia after 79?
Regarding the research or the authoring of a book, it is impossible to conduct interviews of hundreds of thousands of people. We had to set a certain number of people for the purpose of that research. And the accounts of those, say, 100 or 200 interviewees are consistent with others whose accounts are also similar. We selected certain categories of the subjects, namely the victims, that is the first group, and the second group, those who worked during the Khmer Rouge regime. And the third criteria is to use the contemporaneous documents. And fourth, we refer to previous research conducted by other authors. This is an example of a number of grounds for the basis of my research. And and the accounts told by the interviewees are consistent with what we have?
I am sure it's my my questioning, but it seems that I'm not making myself clear. Let me try it differently again. Did you speak to Cham, who had been living in DK, in Siem Reap, who had been living in the former Northwest Zone, Cham, who had been living in the Southwest Zone, Cham, who had been living anywhere else, in order for you to be able to say that there was a nationwide policy to kill all the Cham? In other words, did you speak to any other Cham in other regions, who lived in other regions at the time?
Mr. Expert, please hold on. And international legal lawyer for civil parties, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, everyone. I would like to specify something. Let me specify that we need Council to specify exactly where the expert said they needed a national policy against the Cham. Can he give us the reference? It is possible that you give us the reference, but I do not remember it. It is important, Mr. President, for us to have that specific information, because the crime of genocide against the Cham is a concept that is very limited before this chamber, and Counsel for the Defense is going well beyond the definition of that crime of genocide, because he has to specify the locality in question. I may be wrong, but we are dealing with the crime of genocide by killings across democratic Cambodia. I do not know whether that is exactly what the expert declared, and if that is the case, we need the reference of that particular pronouncement in the document published by the expert to be sure of that that is exactly what the expert gave as his definition.
I'm not entirely sure if I understand this objection or observation, Mr. President. What I do remember is you, Mr. President, asking questions to Mr. Osman at the very beginning of his testimony, and one of your last questions was, in your opinion, was there a policy of genocide in democratic Cambodia? I do not have the exact question now in front of me, but that was your question. What the scope of the genocide in this trial is another matter, but he, Mr. Osman, clearly responded, yes, there was a genocidal policy in democratic Cambodia. And I'm just trying to figure out whether his research was representative at all to come to that conclusion. I don't think he made any qualification as to the nation, that it was only geographical. I didn't hear him say that. I believe he said, and he meant, and if I'm wrong, I'm sure Mr. Osman will correct me, but he meant a nationwide genocidal policy. That's what I'm trying to establish.
Mr. President, thank you. I have a very different recollection. I recall that it was agreed by all parties, and in fact, counsel made the objection, that the issue of whether or not genocide occurred was not one for the expert to offer an opinion on. That was the ultimate legal issue for the court. Counsel objected, I agreed with him, and no one has asked the witness that question. So now he's being cross-examined on an opinion that he was not allowed to give, as far as I understand it.
I think the prosecution is now mixing what I was asking the expert with what the lead civil lawyer, civil party lawyer is saying. I wasn't using the word genocide at all. I was just asking Mr. Osman what he did to make sure that his interviews were somehow representative. And then I'm at liberty to try to establish that. And I was just answering the objection of the...
Very, very briefly, I'm not objecting to that. That's a fine question. It was the representation that the President had asked the witness his opinion about whether it was genocide. I think that's incorrect. The President never did so.
Well, I have it now in front of me so that we are clear. Mr. President, at 9:46 you asked, based on your research on democratic Kampuchea, can you tell the court what are the policies of DK towards the Cham people? Can you elaborate the basic policy of DK regime targeting at or towards the Cham people? And then you say, please refer or focus on your research and study to give your testimony before the chamber. And then Mr. Osman answers, talking about DK policies, I could not find any documents on this matter. I could not find any document which is issued by the Central Committee about the Cham. But I would base on the person who saw such document and also those who participated in the treatment or in the violation against the Cham people. And based on what I heard, what was really happened to Cham people, and I found that Cham people were gathered and brought for execution. So no qualification, no geographical qualification. He's, in layman terms, saying there was a genocide. And as a matter of fact, in all his publications, he uses the genocidal regime, genocidal policy. So I don't think there's any doubt as to what Mr. Hinton's opinion is. What I'm trying to do is just see if I can somehow verify the way of him leading up to that conclusion, which is, by the way, not shared by many other experts except the one of last week.
The distinction, which apparently I thought was clear to them, the defense made this 6 weeks ago. The distinction is the expert, of course, can give his opinion on facts on what the policies were to the Cham. It then is for the chamber, after hearing from the parties, to decide whether that fits the legal definition of genocide. So if counsel wants to ask the witness about his statement that Cham were brought for execution, of course that's proper. But he's now setting up an argument with the witness about genocide when we all agreed that we couldn't ask the witness for his opinion on that.
But I wasn't asking this question. I wasn't asking whether he thinks there was a genocide. I was asking only to tell me if there are any indications whatsoever that his research or that his interviews with individuals is somehow representative. It is our opinion that it is not at all representative. But I'm offering Mr. Osman the possibility to say, well, this is what I did. This is what I did to make sure that the people that I interviewed were indeed representative of everyone, all the Cham living in DK. That's what I'm trying to do, and if he cannot give that, then I'm happy, I'll move on.
President, Mr. Isa Osman, if you can recall the last question put to you by Counsel Copper, you may respond. Isa Osman. Counsel, for my research, I limited the locations for my research, in particular in relation to Krochma and Kongmi districts. And they were part of the east and the central zones. And what happened in these two zones Although I could not conduct research and interviews in all sectors within the zone, it is my opinion that the accounts are quite similar in nature. And you may ask whether such accounts or people actually refer to what happened in other zones. I did not have the ability or the capability to conduct a research throughout the country. As for my book, the main focus was on the two districts, Krochma and Kongmi, and they were part of the east and the central zones. As for its representative to all the Cham people living throughout the country during the regime, I do not have a response for that. It is up to the wisdom of the chamber to make that decision. President, thank you. It is now convenient for a short break. And I noticed that Councillor Copper wishes to say something.
Just if you allow me, Mr. President, to finish the subject before we go into the break, because I have only one last question. So, Mr. Osman, when you're saying I found that Cham people were gathered and brought for execution, when you gave that answer, you limited yourself only to those two districts in the east and the central zone. Is that correct?
As I have just stated in my previous response, I relied on the accounts of those people for authoring the book, and they were the accounts of those who lived in Kongmi and Krochma districts, that is in the east and the central zones. President, it is now convenient for our short break. We take a break now and resume at 25 to 11. Court officer, please assist the expert during the break time and invite him as well as the legal officer of OCIJ back into the courtroom at 25 to 11. The court is now in recess.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ